trouble, it's not my fault. All this I also lose my friends, I lost my baby. That is looking crack only today. Want to change, he wanted so they couldn't try more like to feel. I'd kill the real, take your life in a second. The table drinks coffee in my kitchen, I mentioned eating every song, I just wanted to go away. You decide to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep waiting for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is that now I'm not afraid of anything. Cause they're gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They try by you every new skin of everything is confusing. You will be good but you will be more. You will be good but you will be more. You will be good but you will be more. Alone every day it is a praise of pleasure.
Good morning and welcome to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free. Today we're going to be going over Dillon Mitchell and his situation in Minnesota. At wide receiver, they've got Adam Dillon, who is 28 and a stud, great route runner with sure hands and above average athleticism. He did start to fade a bit down the stretch last year with some uncharacteristic drops and less usage when they changed offensive coordinators. He's durable with 42 straight regular season starts, and over the last 2 years, he's averaged 148 targets, which is 9.2 a game, 102 receptions, 1,300 yards, and 7 touchdowns. He's got 13 yards per route, 9 yards per target, and 13 yards a touch, with a 69% catch rate. His usage shouldn't change anytime soon, but he will likely fall off a cliff when he does start to slow down later in his career. They've also got Stephon Diggs, who is 25. He's super athletic. He has yet to play 16 games in his 4-year career, and he has been dinged up a lot even when he has been playing. Last year, he got 149 targets, 102 catches for 121 yards and 9 touchdowns. His 3-year average is 8.5 targets per game, 1,050 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He averages 11 yards per route, 8 yards per target, and 11 yards per touch with a 70% catch percentage. Diggs is a talented and explosive receiver with constant injury concerns. Since he's only 25, he's not going to be overtaken by anyone soon, but the injuries could stack up and end his career earlier than expected. On that note, I do want to say I did get the Doug Baldwin situation wrong. It did not take very long at all for my first prediction to be incorrect. I thought with the timing of the surgeries and the receivers they took outside of Metcalf that Baldwin was still going to be playing, but then today they just released him with an injury designation, so there's still a chance Baldwin plays, but at this point it's so unlikely that I'm probably going to end up dropping him on the team I do own him. But I'm going to be wrong a lot, but I'm pretty sure I'll be right more often than those misses. Their third receiver is Laquan Treadwell, who's 23. Last year, he had 53 targets for 35 catches, 305 yards, and 1 touchdown. He didn't get his 5th-year option picked up, and he's most likely off the Vikings after this year. Throughout his entire 3-year career, he only has 91 targets, 56 catches for 517 yards and 1 touchdown, averaging 9 yards per route, 6 yards per target, and 9 yards per touch. The rest of the receivers are Jags, except for maybe Chad Beebe, who's in his 2nd year. He looks solid, but he's small, white, and an undrafted free agent. Olabisi Johnson is another 7th-round rookie, as Mitchell is, but I didn't scout him specifically. But from scouting Preston Williams, I know he's not better than Williams, and I did have Williams below Mitchell, primarily due to work ethic and domestic violence concerns. At tight end, they've got Kyle Rudolph, who is 29. Last year, he got 82 targets for 64 catches, 634 yards, 4 touchdowns with a 78% catch percentage. He's solid yet unspectacular and showed improved hands last year compared to his previous seasons. Over his last 2 years, he's averaging 82 targets, 60 catches, 580 yards, and 6 touchdowns. He also averaged 10 yards per route, 7 yards per target, 10 yards per touch with a 74% catch rate. He's most likely going to be on another team next year because they added Irv Smith Jr. in the draft. He's 20 years old and the second best blocker in the class. He's also the best inside power lead blocker I've ever seen at tight end. So what that means is he lines up as a fullback, or what I call the Y tight end, where he's in the normal tight end position, but he's about 1.5 yards in the backfield off the football. And then instead of pulling a guard to kick out an interior D lineman or linebacker, they pull that tight end, Irv Smith, to make the key block. And Irv Smith is amazing at it. Irv has good lateral agility. He was split out as a wideout often at Alabama, and he is athletic, but he doesn't run good routes right now, and overall has low football IQ in the receiving game with some focus drops. I do expect Irv to see the field this year as a blocker to help the run game, but I don't expect much as a receiver as long as Rudolph is still around. At running back, they've got Dalvin Cook, the walking injury. Last year, he had 49 targets, 40 catches, 305 yards, and 2 touchdowns in 11 games played. Over his 2-year career, he averages 4 targets per game with 8 yards per route and 6 yards per target with a very respectable 79% catch percentage. If he does ever play 16 games, that would mean 69 targets, RIP Gronk, 55 receptions, shout out to the fantasy footballers, 420 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's a talented player, but he hasn't figured out how to stay healthy yet, which is concerning. But he did tear an ACL, and then he was recovering from it last year and played in more games. But the jury's definitely still out on Dalvin Cook being able to stay healthy for a full season. To back him up, the Vikings added Alexander Madison out of Boise State in the draft, and he was one of my lowest ranked running backs. I was pretty surprised when they took him in the 3rd round, so I don't have very high hopes for him, but it's always possible I'm wrong and the NFL draft got it right. I do expect one of either Mike Boone, Amir Abdullah, or Rock Thomas to pick up some more receiving work if Cook does go down again. The Vikings quarterback is Kirk Cousins, who is 30. He had about 4,300 yards last year with 30 touchdowns and 100 passer rating. He's a very good quarterback. He has kind of a game manager plus style of play. He'll typically choose the receiver that has the most separation over gambling on a contested catch. The Vikings were 12th to 13th in passing yards per game, depending on whether or not you count sack yards, 10th in passing touchdowns, 20th in total yards per game, and 19th in points per game. The Vikings were also 6th in the NFL in passing attempts per game. One reason for how often they threw the football was that the offensive line was 9th in pass protection, but 23rd in creating yards for the running back, 2nd to last in power, and in the bottom 8 in all of the other run metrics I look at. They did add a 1st-round center, Garrett Bradbury. Irv Smith will help, and they added a 4th-round guard and a 6th-round tackle. So they definitely recognize the need to increase their running game effectiveness with the offensive line and Irv Smith's run blocking capabilities. The biggest reason why I think it will improve is that they spent that 1st on a center, which is the most important position to replace in order to improve the run game. When it comes to their overall offense, they were 7th to last in yards per drive. That's showing that they couldn't convert using the rushing game when they needed it. 10th to last in points per drive. 4th to last in time of possession per drive. Again, showing that they couldn't run the football. And they were the 4th most pass-happy offense in the NFL, with only 37.1% of their plays being runs. Let's go to the strength of their team, the defense, who were 4th in yards per game allowed, 9th in points per game, 15th in rushing yards per game, and 3rd in passing yards per game. The Vikings went 8-7-1 last year, mainly due to their offense's inability to sustain drives, and they didn't draft any defenders until the 5th round, but they did draft 4 total defenders and a ton of undrafted free agents, but I don't expect much change from this unit based on how late all of those players were selected and who their already established starters are. They've got a far above average defensive line, average linebackers, and a very above average secondary. Their head coach is Mike Zimmer, who's going into his 5th year with the Vikings. He's a no bullshit type of guy. When he says something, he means it, which really reminds me of someone. He's a former defensive coordinator of the Bengals. I do believe he'll try and run the ball more going forward, as most defensive-minded coaches do that, but the offensive line and inability of Cook to stay healthy is holding the whole team back right now. The Madison pick doesn't really instill confidence in me of that changing if Cook does go down, but it was a 3rd-round pick, which means I could have been missing something something on film. I really don't think I was, but I guess we'll see. Hopefully they don't need to use him. They do have a new offensive coordinator, Kevin Stefanski, who took over during the season last year, and I don't know much about him other than him stopping Cousins from force-feeding Dillon probably cost me a fantasy championship, but we'll see. I'm pretty sure they're going to try to run the ball more, but they were 6th in passing attempts, so they'll be a very interesting line to see if they can establish a running game. Talk about Dillon Mitchell now. He was my pre-draft wide receiver 13 on film, standing 6 feet, 1 inch tall, 197 pounds, with slightly concerning 8.625 inch hands and a 74.375 inch span. Mitchell is 23 years old, and he did have the 7th worst weight divided by height and span divided by height, and the 2nd worst hand size divided by height of any of the receivers I scouted. At the combine, he ran a 4.46 40, 36.5 inch vert, 122 inch broad jump, put up 12 reps on the bench, didn't run the 3-cone, and ran a 4.29 20-yard shuttle. So none of those times are particularly impressive, but that's where the value of watching the film comes in. The good things that Dillon Mitchell did on film showed amazing separation on comebacks, above average to elite acceleration, long speed, and agility. He finds the soft spot in the zone. He's open often, has great stop-start ability. He really did have very few drops, but we'll get to the types of drops he did make in the bad section. Dillon can make tacklers miss using agility, and in one game, in double overtime in the red zone, with the game on the line, they targeted him 3 straight times. I love to see that type of confidence from a team in that one player. Same as with Emmanuel Butler. Double covered in the red zone, and they still throw him the ball. The same type of thing happened here. He shows great explosion throughout his route breaks. He's got good to great finesse releases, and he does a good job of faking side to side while he's working vertically to get the defensive back off balance. Mitchell runs good routes, great at times. He has shown the ability to make some contested hands catches. He makes hands catches on bubble screens. He can separate using both routes and athleticism, and he has good vision with the ball in his hands. Mitchell was a 7th round pick, so let's get into why he went so late. Mitchell almost never catches with his hands. He has hard hands, meaning when the ball's getting to his hands, instead of cradling the ball and moving his hands and wrists to absorb the momentum of the football, he flexes them and keeps them hard, which causes the ball to bounce off his hands. He has horrible block effort and form, and has a low football IQ on route design and concepts. Mitchell also has issues when defensive backs get physical with him, and he doesn't use physicality to his advantage much during his releases or throughout the routes. He has literally 0 blocking IQ, drops the most hands catches, is lazy in his routes at times, and doesn't come back to the quarterback enough on most plays. Where does this information leave us? Well, he's buried behind 240 target plus receivers and can't really catch all that well with his hands. If you'll remember, during the good section, I mentioned how he very rarely drops anything, which is true, but it's because most of the time he body catches. The reason why he can body catch and choose to body catch is because normally he has that much separation. I honestly don't think there was a defensive back in the Pac-12 that could cover Dillon Mitchell on a comeback route, or most routes. So Mitchell isn't someone to draft in your rookie drafts, or probably even pick up right now, but he's someone to definitely keep an eye on. He's super athletic, he does have work ethic concerns, but a Zimmer-style coach, a no-nonsense coach that won't put up with his bullshit and excuses, could be good for him. His small hands and overall physical stature are a concern, but has rare movement ability and route running ability. He still does need to learn some things, a good amount of things, about when he's open in his route. There are too many times where he lets the defender back in on the play. So he beats the guy with routes and athleticism, but then due to a lack of technical knowledge, allows the defender to get back in on the play. I think next year is where Mitchell could start to become a thing, and without Treadwell, could see him being the wide receiver 3. When you combine that with Diggs' injury concerns and Cousins' style of preferring to throw to the wide open player, Mitchell could work out long term. He's a super risky bet, which is why I don't recommend drafting him or picking him up right now, but he has high upside. He's far more athletic on film than you're ever going to see looking at those combine numbers. I named this episode "Da Mitchell in Minnesota" because it will most likely be a miracle if Dillon Mitchell is fantasy relevant this year in Minnesota. To be honest, I don't expect much next year either, but at some point in time down the road, Dillon Mitchell could be getting open, and if he can improve on his hands and his technique while he's in the NFL for a couple years without any pressure and kind of learning how to be a responsible person from Mike Zimmer, his upside is pretty large. He honestly reminds me of Stephon Diggs, but without the ability to catch with his hands. That's all I've got for today for you guys. I was planning on releasing my Tier 1 wide receiver film note breakdown later today to give you something to listen to over the weekend, but if you've ever started a venture by yourself, you're going to realize that things don't seem like they're going to take that long in your head, and then when you actually start sitting down and doing it, it takes 2 or 3 times the amount of time you thought it would. So I do apologize for that, but that will be available Monday for sure. I just simply ran out of time, but it won't happen again. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to this episode today. I did get some feedback about shortening my song length, so I'm just going to go on the record now and discuss my thought process with the song. First off, I'm probably never going to change the length of the introduction, as that piece of music isn't really complete without having the intro and the first full verse. I did tack on the rest of the song on the end, but I understand the concern of when you're trying to catch up on episodes that extra 2 minutes of song and then now you have another minute and a half of song can get a little tedious. I'm not changing the first minute and a half because when you click on that episode, your hand is right next to the button that allows you to skip forward 30 seconds. You hit that 3 times and you're at the start of the show. But I will make a deal with you about shortening the back half of the song. A lot of people are under the impression that a microphone doesn't cost money, building a studio doesn't cost money, spending your time creating, planning, recording, and editing an episode doesn't cost time, and that introduction song costs $50 for the lifetime rights. So this is my deal. When I get 11 $5 Patreon members, I will shorten the end of the song after the episode considerably. Until then, I'm not making a profit on that part of the song, so I'm not doing it. But if you want to vote with your dollars, go ahead. I do understand it. I do understand the sentiment. I'm just a cheap bastard and can't justify throwing $30 down the toilet. But anyways, on to the songs of the day. The happy song of the day is International Players Anthem by Outkast and UGK, and the football song of the day is Soldier and the skit before the song by Eminem. If you've heard Soldier before but haven't heard the skit in the beginning, the only way to listen to that song is with both of them in a row. People who had the album know exactly what I mean. Hope you all have a good weekend. You've been listening to Dynasty 365, where the film will set you free.
Puts me so much trouble, it's not my fault. All this, I also lose my friends, I lost my baby that is looking crack. Only today want to change. He wanted us on a cougar to try what I to feel. I'd kill the bill, take your life in a second. The devil drinks coffee in my kitchen, I mentioned in every song, I just wanted to go away. You decide to stay in the well. I want to be forgiven, I don't like this kid for money. Sorry I was scared, you're not the way it feels. Like to sleep waiting for someone to come in and kill you. The final thing is that now we're not friends of anything. Go they gonna kill anyone that feels so powerful. They try by you, I read your skin up, everything is confusing. You will be good, but you will be more. You will be good, but